on the career side, when I moved back to South Dakota, I passed the bar, and my first job I got was in banking. I mentioned I worked 10 years at what was then National Bank of South Dakota, and I started coming to Madison, in fact, to the branch that was here. Later it became First Bank, and then later it was sold and became a Community First Bank. But for a period of time, I would come and visit with trust customers in Madison during those years. I worked there for about 10 years. And while I was there, I started volunteering at a children's charity called Children's Home Society South Dakota. It's a statewide charity, helps abused and neglected children. Some kids come from good families, but most come from abuse or neglect situations. And they have a Black Hills Children's Home and a Sioux Falls Children's Home. I started volunteering there. I volunteered there for about 5 years, and then I quit the bank and went to work there. And for 11 years, I was in their fundraising effort. I ran their foundation. And then when the executive director retired, then I became the executive director. And I did that up until last November. You know, some people think when I became lieutenant governor, that's a full-time job, but it's not. It's sort of like a legislator. During the legislative session, you move to Pierre and live in a motel for 2 months, and then when the session's over, then you move back home, and that's when I went back to Children's Home Society. So I would commute from the farm to Children's Home, and Sioux Falls Children's Home, or emergency shelter, or women's shelter, Children's Inn. I also would spend at least a week every month out in the Black Hills, at Black Hills Children's Home, an emergency shelter out there. And did that right up until last November when I began focusing on the campaign for governor. So that's kind of the career side of things, what I've been doing. On the political side, the way I got involved in politics is I got recruited. I think a lot of people who are involved in any kind of elective office get recruited. Their neighbor or their friend says, hey, why don't you try this? And somebody called me up and asked me, what you thought about running for the legislature? And that was in '96. So I was working at Children's Home at the time, so I checked with the board of directors, and they were okay with it. So I ran for the state senate in '96 and won. When I got to Pierre, Mike Grounds was already a state senator. He'd been there for a few years, and we served together in the state senate for 4 years. And then in 2000, he was forced out by term limits. I served for still 2 more years. And in 2002, when he won the nomination for a governor, he called me up and asked me if I wanted to be his running mate. I remember to this day, that day, it was Father's Day, and Linda and I and our daughter were in Del Rapids. We'd gone to church that morning, and Linda said, well, it's Father's Day. What do you want to do? It's your day. And I said, well, let's just rent a video and go home and watch a video. So we have 2 cars in town for some reason. Linda took 1 car home to the farm. Sarah and I went to a video store and rented the video. We got home maybe 15 minutes behind her. Walked in the house, and Linda said, hey, you'll never guess who called. Mike Grounds called. And I said, well, what did he want? And she said, well, he said he wanted your advice on something. And she said, I told him I voted for him. And later I said, that was a good thing to say. So I called him back and I said, Linda said you wanted my advice. He said, no, not really. Truth be told, I want to ask if you'd like to be my running mate. So, of course, that was a complete surprise. But anyway, I talked to the family and talked to the board of directors at Children's Home and called Mike back that night and said, definitely yes. So we ran in 2002 and were successful and ran for re-election again in 2006 and were elected again. And so now, 2010, Mike cannot run. This is his last year as governor. He may not run again because of term limits, and so I'm hoping to be elected. And